DOE needs to have an integrated disposal schedule that is influenced by what is fastest and least expensive, and doing so will likely save billions of dollars.
Hi, and welcome to GAO's Watchdog Report, your source for fact-based, nonpartisan news and information from the U.S. Government Accountability Office. I'm your host, Holly Hobbs. For decades, the Department of Energy has been working to clean up dangerous nuclear waste left behind by U.S. nuclear weapons production and energy research. To complete this cleanup mission, the DOE must safely dispose of the remaining 11 million cubic meters of waste, which pose risks to human health and our environment. But finding space to dispose of this waste is an obstacle. We'll get an update on this effort from GAO's Nathan Anderson, who has a new report out today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me again, Holly.
So Nathan, the Department of Energy has been working on cleaning up nuclear waste for a very long time. How much has been cleaned up and how much remains?
Well, as the Cold War ended, the Department of Energy was charged with cleaning up 107 sites across the country, and these were all sites that were involved with nuclear weapons production and nuclear energy research. The department has cleaned up 92 of the 107 sites, but the 15 sites that remain are also the most challenging. So DOE estimates that cleanup of these sites will generate over 11 million cubic meters of radioactive waste. This would fill about 4,500 Olympic-sized swimming pools or 11 Empire State Buildings.
This might seem like a basic question, but how do you clean up nuclear waste? How is that done?
It might be basic, but I really like that question because it prompts the "it depends" answer. There are different types of waste with different levels of risk, and these differences lead to different treatment approaches. Most of DOE's waste is technically low-level waste, and that means that it has very low levels of radioactivity. Think of contaminated soil that has to be dug up or tearing down old facilities where trace amounts of contamination occurred. Several DOE sites have low-level waste disposal facilities on them, and there are 3 facilities across the country, including private ones, that accept waste from DOE locations.
So that's the low-level waste. What about the waste with higher levels of radioactivity?
So the department also disposes of another type of waste, a little bit riskier, called transuranic waste, which was largely generated from working with plutonium. This includes materials like clothes, tools, rags, and debris. DOE disposes of transuranic waste in a facility in New Mexico where the waste is stored 2,200 feet underground in what is essentially an old salt mine. Now, the trickier type of waste is high-level waste. The high-level waste is largely sludge stored in underground tanks at Hanford, Idaho, and Savannah River sites. It needs to be extracted and immobilized before disposing of it. And this waste must be disposed of in a permanent deep geologic repository by law. But the United States stopped working on the Yucca Mountain project, and so we don't have one. And it's not looking like we'll have one for decades to come.
So why has it taken so long?
As you can imagine, this is a huge, not in my backyard issue. Even the communities that want to host disposal sites because of the tremendous amount of money that sites can bring in face resistance from state governments that don't like the idea of nuclear waste being transported across state lines. Now, we already transport low-level waste as well as transuranic waste all across the country for storage every week. So this is not a difficult or new engineering or transportation issue. We do it all the time. This is a social issue and a political issue that arises when new waste from government sites gets debated.
So if we're already doing it, what's the issue here?
One of the challenges here is inertia. In many cases, the department has already committed to the methods and schedules for waste treatment and disposal in agreements with state and federal regulators. So newer, different approaches would require the Department of Energy to renegotiate.
So given all of these challenges, right, is the DOE looking into alternative options for disposing of waste?
In a word, no. Instead, DOE relies on sites to conduct this kind of planning. This is a problem because disposal isn't something that can be done in isolation. These disposal facilities that are ultimately going to store most of this waste, they have limited capacity. So the government needs to come in with a centralized function and the analysis to back it up to say, we're going to weigh the different needs and the different risks and then determine what waste should go from which site to what facility and when. And there are also numerous waste streams that don't yet have an agreed upon disposal option. Now, these waste streams aren't terribly dangerous, and in many cases, they appear to meet the criteria for acceptance at existing disposal facilities. But DOE still needs to reach agreement with its states that house these. So we did something a bit unconventional in this evaluation. We actually did what we feel is DOE's job for them. And through a bunch of complicated analysis, we basically optimized the schedule and found that billions of dollars could be saved by simply resequencing when DOE sends what waste to what facility.
So what's the impact of all of this? What's the impact of the delays? What's the impact of DOE not taking action on this?
Ultimately, DOE will not be able to complete its cleanup mission without finding a disposal pathway for all of its nuclear waste. There is also no way that DOE can fulfill all of its commitments it has already made to states where the waste is presently stored or being treated. So the status quo is going to need to change.
So Nathan just told us that while the DOE has cleaned up most nuclear waste sites, the 15 that remain are the most challenging to address, and DOE needs a new strategy for doing so. Nathan, what more do we think the Department of Energy should be doing?
We're making a few recommendations in this report that could really be game changers for the taxpayer if they're implemented. I'm going to list three. So one is we're recommending that DOE develop models that identify optimal disposal pathways and schedules. Two, we're recommending that DOE develops a nationwide and integrated disposal strategy for its waste. And then third, we're recommending that DOE leverage the optimization analysis and the integrated planning efforts to work holistically with its regulators.
And last question, what's the bottom line of this report?
The status quo needs to be disrupted. Rather than have nuclear waste disposal stagnate based on decades-old and stovepiped agreements with states that don't consider the waste in other states, DOE needs to have an integrated disposal schedule that is influenced by what is fastest and least expensive, and doing so will likely save billions of dollars.
That was Nathan Anderson talking about our new report on nuclear waste cleanup. Thanks for your time, Nathan.
Thanks, Holly. Appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to the Watchdog Report. To hear more podcasts, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And make sure to leave a rating and review to let others know about the work we're doing. For more from the Congressional Watchdog, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, visit us at gao.gov.